Hi, friends. Welcome back to my channel. Today's podcast is about why you must read for beginner level. Why do I need to read in English? My students often ask me this. They think, I go to classes, I do my homework, I watch films in English. Why should I read books? Actually, reading is the best way to improve your English. I will tell you why. First, reading is extremely important right now. In 2006, only 1 out of every 100 people attended university. Currently, 7 out of every 100 people attend university. Every job now requires more reading and writing than it did 100 years ago. This is true for everyone. It doesn't matter whether you work in an office or as a mechanic. Second, reading is the best approach to improve your communication skills, vocabulary, and grammar. It will not improve your listening ability, but it will broaden your vocabulary. And having a better vocabulary allows you to listen more easily, which improves your listening skills. In school, you probably read lots of English. You probably read boring textbooks and stories with exercises at the end. But I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about reading for pleasure. That means reading a book you enjoy because you enjoy it. You are not reading because your teacher said, read this book. You are not reading because you think, I should read this book. You read because you choose to. In 1965, they conducted an experiment in American schools. These schools enrolled males who had committed felonies. For example, some of them stole items. They gave some of the boys free books. They were entertaining books, just like James Bond. They stated, you can do whatever you want. You do not need to read the books. However, the boys did read the books. They read a large number of books. Some boys read one book every 2 days. After 2 years, they gave the students a test. The students who got the books got better at reading and writing, and they liked school more. Students who did not receive books did not improve their reading and writing skills. Actually, some of them worsened. This isn't just true for native speakers. They also did an experiment on students learning English in the Fiji Islands. They used 3 ways to teach. The first way was normal English teaching. They did grammar classes, exercises, and so on. The second way was reading in silence. The students read books in class. The third way was reading together. The teacher read books to the class. After a year, the 2 methods of reading were the best. They fared much better than the students who took regular English classes. They repeated the experiment in Singapore. There, the students who read in silence did very well. They did the best in grammar tests. Other students did grammar classes, but they did worse in grammar tests. During normal courses, we try to memorize grammar and vocabulary. We automatically learn stuff while reading. Perhaps you're thinking, when I read in English, it's too difficult. I have to consult the dictionary all the time. It's dull. I can't do it. I understand. So I wrote this book. The stories in this book are easy and enjoyable, so I hope you will like reading it. The early stories are short and simple, whereas the later stories are longer and more difficult. After finishing the book, you will think, Wow, I did it! You can now read the stories at the beginner, pre-intermediate, intermediate, and advanced levels. The stories are all fairy tales. Some fairy tales are very popular, while others are less popular. One of them I composed myself. Perhaps you're thinking, fairy tales? Fairy tales are for children. I need useful vocabulary. I need to learn about business and science. That can't be fun. Actually, the vocabulary in these stories will be helpful. McQuillan conducted an experiment analyzing vocabulary in 22 novels. 85% of the words were from academic word lists of words required to study at university. Rolls and Rogers also conducted an experiment. They were intrigued by the question, if students read 1,000,000 words of science fiction, will they learn important science words for university? The response was yes. So, definitely, fairy stories might help you as well. I understand if you still do not believe me. When I learned about all of this, I found it difficult to believe. But I like to try new things and learn languages. So in 2017, I decided to try an experiment. I had wanted to learn Spanish for a long time, but I didn't learn much in traditional classes. I said, I'll read 1,000,000 words in Spanish. Afterwards, I will see what my level is. 1,000,000 words is about 20 novels, so it was a lot of work. I started with very easy reading, like this book. Then I started reading translations of books that I knew in English. For example, I have read Harry Potter and Game of Thrones in English, so I read them in Spanish too. Finally, I read new books in Spanish. I read Latin American authors, that means writers, such as Isabel Allende, Luis Jorge Borges, and Manuel Puig. I adored them. I also listened to podcasts, but I always read the transcripts and incorporated the words into my plan. After I had read 1,000,000 words, I wrote and spoke with native speakers. I was at an intermediate level. I could understand almost everything I read, hear people when they spoke clearly, and hold conversations. And I'd spent most of my time reading rather than speaking. In 1 year, I learned more than most students would in 5 years. I did not try to remember grammar or vocabulary. I learned them naturally. Maybe you're thinking, I don't believe this, or wow, I'm going to read for hours every day, but I have to say something very important. You must read books that are easy. You must read books that are fun. If a book is too difficult or too boring, put it down and find another one. Stephen Krashen, an expert in language teaching, says, only read things in English that are fun and interesting. Read things that are really easy that you wouldn't read in your native language because they are too easy. So you can read comic books, magazines, detective stories, romance novels, and so on. Do not feel bad about reading translations. If you read simple books, you will quickly understand the meaning of any unfamiliar words. You will not need to use a dictionary. So, what exactly constitutes easy? Experiments demonstrate that you should understand at least 98% of the words in a text. 98%? That's really high. I understand, but let me show you an example. Here's a text where 10% of the words are not real words. so you should understand 90% of the words. Jerry threw back his covers and jumped out of bed. While preparing breakfast, he gave himself a bump. He poured butter on his poffer and made coffee. He took up his phone when someone called. His whiskey fell on the ground as he was taken aback by the person who was teasing him. Is that simple to comprehend? Could you read that as an entire book? This passage has the same meaning, but just 2% of the words are fake. Therefore, you ought to comprehend 98% of the text. Jerry jumped out of bed and opened the curtains. He sang to himself as he made breakfast. He made coffee and put butter on his toast. Someone called his phone, and he picked it up. He was very surprised by who was calling, so his Vinky fell on the floor. How was that? You probably didn't understand everything, but it was more fun to read than the first text. That's why reading for pleasure is so great. Maybe you don't understand everything, but you understand enough to follow the story, and you don't have to pick up a dictionary. Read something simpler if this book proves to be too difficult for you. Read something more entertaining if you find it boring. It's okay that not everyone finds my writing to be appealing. Look for a book that will benefit you. We learn a lot more when we are having fun. There are no exercises in this book because I want it to be enjoyable. Although I considered including these after every story, I don't think it would be a worthwhile use of your time. You should read more, though. Reading is enjoyable. You can try the level above once you finish this book. Because you've already read the stories, you'll be more familiar with them and find them easier to understand. But maybe after you finish this book, you'll enjoy stories. I hope so. If you want to read more, check out my podcast, How to Read English. I write a new story every week with audio and text, and there are over 100 episodes for you to listen to. Happy reading and happy learning. I hope you enjoyed the beginner level version. Now I'll just explain some words that are in the intermediate level text. Proficiency means skill. Usually, we use the word proficiency to talk about language skills. If you have a high level of proficiency in English, it means you can talk and write English very well. When you train your ear, you try to make your ear better at hearing different sounds. Usually, there are 2 ways you can train your ear. You can train your ear for music so that you can hear the difference between different musical notes better. Or you can train your ear for language so that you can listen better in that language. A young person who has committed crimes, a juvenile delinquent, is a juvenile delinquent. Since juvenile offenders are not adults, they are not sent to prison. Rather, they are sent to juvenile delinquent reform centers, which are facilities designed to assist in the rehabilitation and reformation of young individuals. Replicating a study entails repeating an existing academic study in a new location. The idea is to replicate the study using identical parameters to check if the results are the same. A study is regarded scientifically confirmed or disproven if it is done several times and produces the same results. When you memorize anything, you force yourself to remember it. There are numerous techniques to memorize information. One method is to repeat it several times to yourself. Another approach is to envision an image, a picture that goes with it. To be honest, people often try to memorize words when they learn a language, but this is a very bad way of learning words, as you will forget it within a few months. Second language acquisition is the scientific study of how we learn languages. Second languages are languages that are not your native language, your first language, and acquisition means acquiring, learning. The field of second language acquisition has lots of important research for language teachers like me. Saying something like, "There's no shame in doing it," implies that you shouldn't feel guilty or ashamed about doing it. For instance, a lot of individuals are afraid of making mistakes when speaking a language, although mistakes are not a source of shame. It is normal to make mistakes when learning a language, thus we shouldn't feel bad about it. Something is easily understandable when it is intelligible. When I teach, I put a lot of effort into making sure that the kids can understand me and that I am intelligible to them. I hope this edition of the show makes sense to you. Don't sweat it means don't worry about it. For example, if one of my students says, "I'm really sorry, miss. I tried really hard to complete my homework by today, but I ran out of time. Can I have more time to do it?" I would say, "Don't sweat it. Take as long as you need." When you contradict something, you say the opposite of it. You say something against it. For example, if you tell your children, "Don't smoke," but then you go outside and smoke a cigarette, you're contradicting yourself. Actually, humans contradict ourselves very often. Okay, so listen and enjoy. Hope you have enjoyed the reading.